All right. It's time for Buckeye Grove Instant Access.
It's about time.
With the latest breaking news, analysis, and much, much more from around the world of Ohio State. Brought to you by BuckeyeGrove.com and the Unscripted Ohio Podcast Network.
You're so money and you don't even know it.
Let's move quickly and hand it off to our host, Kevin Noon.
It's time to start running!
Welcome to the BIA podcast. That's Buckeye Grove Instant Access Podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Noon. I'll be joined here shortly by Griffin Strom. It is Thursday, June 10th, and some big news coming out in terms of the college football playoff. A working group has come up with an expansion proposal, 12 teams. Let's bring in Griffin so we can kind of get to the nuts and bolts of what this is. Griffin, welcome to the show. What have you kind of read as we've been rapidly going through release after release, trying to kind of get the ins and outs of what this all means?
Yeah, so this has been something that we've obviously been hearing rumors about for a few days now, and then just a couple hours ago we were hearing reports that this was going to be in the works here, and pretty much a done deal in terms of the recommendation, of course. So yeah, we've got an expansion from 4 teams. Obviously, an expansion has kind of been a pressing topic for many years. Now we're looking at 12 teams, and this is going to be a recommendation that gets reviewed next week, next Thursday and Friday in Chicago. It wouldn't immediately go into effect or anything like that, though. Bill Hancock said that it won't change anything this year or next year. Even if it did get approved in the subsequent weeks here. But it does look like a pretty fleshed out plan. Interesting notes here is that the top 6 highest ranked conference champions would make the cut, along with 6 at-large bids. So this kind of addresses multiple different concerns from different groups here, which took issue with the 4-team format previously, which of course would be that a Power 5 champion gets left out every year in the 4-team format, and it really gives almost essentially no chance to a lot of these group of 5 champions that might be coming in undefeated by the time the selection show comes around. So with 12 teams and the 6 conference champions stipulation there, that kind of addresses several of those needs at once.
Yeah, exactly. And to kind of add to the plan, it's 12 teams. It's going to be your 6 highest conference champions, not your Power 5 and +1. It's going to be your 6 highest as determined by the College Football Playoff Committee. And then your next 6 teams, at-large teams. Your first 4 teams are going to get byes, and then the remaining 8 teams will play a first round, more or less. And by doing that, 4 of those games will be taking place at the home stadiums of 5, 6, 7, and 8. And according to the calendar, while it's still being worked out, broadly the recommendation is a 2-week period after the conference championship games. And then that means that the quarterfinals would be played on January 1st or 2nd, when New Year's Day falls on a Sunday, it would be the 2nd and an adjacent day. And then your semis and your championships are still TBD. Your semis likely will not be played as a doubleheader as they are now, where you have kind of a 4 o'clock game and an 8 o'clock game. And there would not be modifications in terms of how the rankings are to try and avoid rematches and things of that nature. Whereas in the NC2A men's basketball tournament, there is some consideration put in place in terms of how brackets are put together to try and keep some things happening, not happening in like first round matchups or second round matchups.
Yeah, so there's a lot of interesting information there. Some of the details in terms of scheduling, I still have to comb through. But I guess one big talking point for this, I feel like we should get into, is the fact that I think a lot of people were kind of hearing this 12-team rumor and maybe thinking that was a little too much, and that maybe 8 was possibly a better number. That's just what I've been seeing, all over the internet and in conversations with other reporters and things of that nature. That people seem to like the number 8 better, but this format does allow for more of those, group of 5 teams to get in there and just, opens the field up more to see if some of these teams like a Cincinnati from last year, a Coastal Carolina from last year, both teams that, came in undefeated into that selection day, will now potentially have those opportunities to match up with the big boys of college football, if you will.
Exactly. And, it's interesting because as I think through this, and I've got a lot of points that I want to make, and I promise not to turn this into a 30-minute show. I mean, very easily could. But, the first thing is, once again, all the power is going to be in the hands of the College Football Playoff Committee. Because whereas it was a beauty contest just for 4 slots before, now it's going to be a beauty contest for 12, which is fine. But then it's going to be, the 4 teams all vying for that, that bye week to be able to come out of their conference championship game first week of December, not have to play again until New Year's, which is kind of standard operating procedure right now, as opposed to coming out of there saying like December 7th, then having to load up and play 2 weeks after, which would be the 21st, and then turn around and play 11 days after on the 1st, and having major holidays for late December holidays in there, Christmas, Hanukkah, what have you. It just certainly seems to be a bit of a logjam. There's going to be a lot of pressure to have, one of those 4 byes if you're Ohio State's, Clemson's, Alabama's of the world or whatnot. And, I still, I guess with the lack of transparency that we've seen with the committee from year to year, and there have been better committees and worse committees in the eyes of, the judging public or whatnot, we're not necessarily having, we may have a more inclusive process with 12 teams, but we're not necessarily having a more open process.
Yeah, and what you're touching on is, something that it's just at the end of the day, anytime you're, having these decisions made by, an unbiased group, but everyone's going to come in with, certain biases, and it's a subjective thing at the end of the day when it comes to selecting, which teams go in which order. There's always going to be frustrations from certain groups that you can't get around, even if you expand the field. And so, obviously with the BCS system, the top 2 teams, the first, version 1.0 of the, CFP 4 teams, we're always talking about opening it up a little bit more so that, more teams can get in, but there's always going to be that cutoff where people are always going to be arguing for, the first couple teams outside of that cut. And then obviously with what you're talking about now is that the bye weeks for those first 4 seeds, which are just going to be huge because obviously these are college students at the end of the day, and that's kind of a huge concern about not wanting to open it up to an infinite number of teams, because you can't have these kids playing just so many games at the end of the year. We're already up to like 15. And so, adding on to that is just it gets a little bit much when you're, a college student and things of that nature. And so, there's going to be, still the same type of thing where people are still going to be, frustrated with some of these subjective decisions at the end of the day.
And you talk about number of games, and while everybody plays the same number of regular season games, it's not the same makeup, where you have certain conferences that play eight league games, some that play 9, some play FCS opponents, some don't. There's still going to be some jockeying going on, in my opinion, because, okay, your top 6 conference champions are going to get in, but then that leaves 6 more spots. We're not necessarily reading about a cap on how many of those additional 6 spots can go to one league. Wouldn't there be some sort of benefit or at least movement to try and clear the deck as much as you can to ensure not only that you're getting a second team in, but potentially a third one?
Yeah, it'll be definitely be interesting to see for sure. I'm kind of interested to just see, everyone's been calling for, seeing these matchups with some of these group of 5 teams playing against, the Alabamas, the Clemsons, and Ohio States. I wonder, if once we end up seeing some of these matchups, will people, if they go the way that I think a lot of people think that they might go, which is, blowouts in favors of, the blue chip teams, will people then, be like, okay, maybe this was a mistake to open the field up more? And, why did we expand the field? I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, exactly. I know a lot of times people talk about the whole situation of a team not getting up for a game or whatnot. I mean, if you can't get up for a game in the college football playoff, whether it's 1 round, 2 rounds, 4 rounds, whatever have you, then maybe you weren't that good of a team to begin with. But, you are going to be asking these teams to be playing, potentially 3 games in essentially December and 2 games in January. And are we really necessarily going to be seeing are we going to be seeing a lot of upsets? I don't know if we're going to be seeing a lot of upsets. Everybody can say, well, in the first year of the college football playoff, Ohio State was the 4 seed, goes on to knock off number 1 seeded Alabama, and then goes and beats Oregon. So, but is a 4-over-1 upset, or, are we going to see a 12-over-5? I mean, yeah, we said for years and years and years, and it only was up until recent in the NC2A men's basketball tournament that we saw 16 finally beat a 1. We certainly have seen 15s beat 2s, and don't necessarily want to get into that one too much with recency being there. But I don't know. I don't know if this is going to necessarily give us a better national champion in terms of diversifying the field this way. I still think that the winner every year is pretty much going to come out of the top 6, and pretty much almost every year is going to come out of the top 4, because there's a reason why that happened. And people can be like, well, we've seen Boise State do this and that. Well, that's different, because that's a game that doesn't lead to anywhere. When Boise State beats somebody in a Fiesta Bowl that is not part of a playoff system, and they beat a team that has no interest in being there because they had championship aspirations, and they realize that they have nothing to gain and everything to lose. They go out there and they win the game as expected, and it's a big deal. You won the game you were supposed to win. And if they go out there and lose, and then they just look bad, and more often than not, they're losing those games. So, I don't know. I mean, again, we're recording this podcast within about 60, 75 minutes of the news coming out. We both scrambled to kind of read everything that we could. Again, you're listening to the BIA podcast. I'm Kevin. I'm joined here by Griffin. Let me give you kind of the next couple dates that are of key note in this. The 11-member management committee will review this at meetings in Chicago, June 17th and 18th. And if the management committee endorses this, then it will go to a board of managers, which will meet in Dallas on June 22nd. So again, that doesn't mean, as Griffin had said earlier, that we're going to be seeing this in place this year or next year. I mean, nothing before 23, and then the 4-team contract really runs through 25, 26. But we certainly could see something going in place before that. But certainly seems as if, they have some plans. They've really kind of put some thought into it and have things there, but we don't have all the information at this point. I mean, and I don't think that they have all the information, because until they get some of this passed, I don't know if you really need to get through the minutia.
Right. And, we are going to hear from the Bill Hancock, I believe, here in about an hour, but that might have already happened by the time you're listening to this. But we'll see if they give us any more details or have any answers for us as well. But yeah, it'll definitely be interesting to see, and I'll be interested to see if they are going to make any modifications to the plan, or if this is kind of the plan that we'll end up seeing really go into effect as is down the line.
Based on what Ohio State is right now, and we know that there are ebbs and flows in terms of teams and their fortunes. Ohio State certainly has not been a team that's had a lot of down moments through program history, of at least extended. But if 12 teams becomes the norm, should Ohio State fans, in your opinion, just expect to be in the playoff every year? I mean, I know they expect to be in the playoff every year now with 4. But realistically, if this is open to 12, do you see anytime soon the landscape changing to the point where Ohio State is not always going to be there?
I really don't, honestly. I mean, I really think that, a 12-team expansion, you're going to find that Ohio State, makes that cut pretty routinely, I would have to imagine. I mean, just in my lifetime, like, how many times would Ohio State really have missed that cut? Not all that many times, as I've been a, conscious sports fan and whatnot, sports follower. And it's kind of interesting. Right now the expectation from a lot of Ohio State fans is, at least, getting to the 4-team playoff. It'll be interesting to see, how that expectation kind of shifts for a lot of people as it pertains to Ohio State, in terms of expectations and things like that. But yeah, I mean, I can't see there being, unless, things drastically change, in the next couple of years for Ohio State, as, things as it is possible to happen in this sport. But, with all these, the recruiting that Ohio State's been doing recently, I mean, I really just can't see Ohio State making that cut anytime soon.
As we get ready to wrap up this abbreviated version of the BIA podcast, what is, and I know we didn't really have a chance even to prepare in advance of this, so I'm sorry if I'm throwing something out of left field at you. If there's one question that you have coming out of these releases with maybe not all the details in the world figured out, what is the biggest question that you have that you would like to see answered in the coming days or weeks? As I said, this manager's vote isn't until June 22nd. So, I mean, just shy of 2 weeks from now. So there's a lot of time for things to get there. But what is it that you want to, that you don't know at this point, isn't laid out well enough that you kind of want the answer for before you can sit there and give a thumbs up or thumbs down on this whole deal?
I mean, I guess one issue that's popping into my head as we're talking about this is the fact that, do players have any say in the fact that, they might have to, play extra games and things of that nature and put their body through that. I know for the longest time in the NFL, with adding games, it was, a thing where there was a lot of pushback and players were saying, the owners don't care about the players' safety. This is obviously adding another game or 2 games or whatever the models have been in the past, for more money. How do the players feel about that? Obviously the players that are going to be on teams that wouldn't have made it before are obviously going to be thrilled to get that opportunity. But at the same time, that's just kind of one aspect of it that pops into my head.
And I'll throw in, when we're talking about the money, as name, image, likeness comes around, I mean, what happens to players, though, that have a per game, type of endorsement or whatever? There's certainly going to be an opportunity to make more money. Is there the belief that, as we're not going to get to a situation where NIL is not going to be real, it's going to be real. I don't care what your opinion is on it. It's just accept it. It's going to be here in some way, shape, or form. Is that the belief? Is that why the door is opening there? Because there is going to be the potential of compensation, but, we don't know until we know how many players out of 85 on scholarship in football. And I know NIL is something so much larger than just football, but we're only talking about football right now. NIL is going to really kind of be an interesting case study to see what it means, and is the belief that players are going to be getting compensated over and above their scholarship, their books, things along those natures, and cost of attendance, that this is okay to move forward with. I mean, and I don't know. I don't have the answer for it. I'm not sure if Griffin has the answer for it. I'm not sure if Bill Hancock has the answer for it.
Yeah, I certainly don't have all that many answers right now, but I'm looking forward to getting some of those as we move along here in this process. And it's interesting that, it is kind of moving along so quickly, in the fact that, just next Thursday, there's already going to be, the next stage of it will already kind of be, we'll be through that next stage of it. And then, just a week after that, they'll have another process with, either moving it forward or amending it or what have you.
And I want to end on one final note. I'm just reading on Twitter right now. A writer had posted a tweet saying that based on the 12-team setup, if we had this since 2014, which was the first year of the CFP, here's how the conferences would have broken down in terms of appearances. The Big Ten with 20 appearances, the SEC with 19, the ACC with 12, the Big 12 with 12, the Pac-12 with 11, the AAC, which is the American, with 5, Independent with 2 with an asterisk, and I don't see what the asterisk there is. I mean, Notre Dame or whatnot. And an interesting note, Notre Dame would never be able to get a bye based on their not being in a conference under the way that the rules are. And then the Mountain West, MAC, and Sunbelt with 1 each. So, it certainly could be a very profitable situation for the Big Ten being right there, especially when you look at under the 4-team setup, the Big Ten got itself shut out with some pretty good teams representing it, and those teams happen to be Ohio State, but getting shut out with 5 conferences trying to fit into 4 slots, and sometimes only 3 conferences being represented.
Yeah, definitely. I am a little surprised to hear that, the Big Ten would have had, even more appearances and whatnot. But at the same time, yeah, I mean, you just broke it down. I mean, the group of 5 conferences getting, some opportunities, obviously not as much as those other, the Power 5 conferences. But yeah, it'll definitely be interesting to watch moving forward.
Exactly. Well, there you have it. We've gone about 20 minutes. I want to thank Griffin for being part of the show, and I want to thank you for listening. We will have so much more on this over at BuckeyeGrove.com. And if you're a listener but not a member, be sure to sign up now. Get a free trial through August 10th. Use offer code VISITS2021. That's VISITS 2021, and get a free trial through August 10th. But once again, want to thank you for listening to the show, and we will talk to you again here very, very soon.
Be sure to stay up to date with Buckeye Grove Instant Access when the news breaks or after the big game, exclusively at BuckeyeGrove.com or anytime on SoundCloud, iTunes, Google Play, or Stitcher as part of the Unscripted Ohio Podcasts Network. Hit that subscribe button so you can stay in the know and never miss a single episode.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to click on that subscribe button so you don't miss a single thing, and come visit us over at BuckeyeGrove.com for all the best Ohio State information on the web.